Hello everyone, and welcome to this end of year review for 2020. Something a little different that usually this kind of video only goes out to channel members. I thought I'd do this one as an end of year for the channel as a whole, and hopefully you all like it. If you do, let me know in the comments section. I thought we'd go back over some of the highlights of 2020, see what the high points were, but also inevitably, as we know, there were quite a few low points too. I've got my calendar here, and I thought we'd start back in January 2020. As you all know, January, February and March were all relatively normal months. I started the year by visiting Vienna, Rome, and also Malaga. It was great to be able to have the chance to do a bit of filming in Vienna and Rome, taking the time not only just to do a bit of plane spotting, but also to have a look at some of the local sites. Going to Rome, for example, the Vatican City, and just taking in all the scenery, the history, and it was a really nice time. Then at the end of January, I got the chance to go for a few days away to Malaga. This was really nice chance to get away and also do a bit of plane spotting when it allowed. So January was a fairly quiet month, a nice trip to Vienna, Rome and Malaga, with obviously a bit of plane spotting at Newcastle Airport. As I mentioned in the best of Newcastle International Airport for 2020, we had quite a fair few storms during January, so as and when I got the opportunity, I'd go down, film that content and then try to share it with all of you. In January we were at about 9,500 subscribers, so just under the 10,000 mark. February came along and we started off the month on what was quite a nice high. Lufthansa began flights from Munich to Newcastle using their Airbus A319s. This was nice to see them operating the mainline fleet to Newcastle. We've had Eurowings and Lufthansa Cityline in the past, but to see Lufthansa come to Newcastle was a great boost for the airport. I filmed that on Monday the 3rd of February 2020, and the following day I did what was probably one of the craziest trips I've ever done. Myself and 3 others set off to film the first RAF P8 Poseidon arrive into Kinloss Barracks in Scotland. Now, for us in Northumberland, that involved driving directly from here right the way up to the north of Scotland, pretty much a direct 6-hour drive there and then a 6-hour drive back in one day. So the 4 of us did it, and it was a fantastic trip. Yes, it involved an early start, but we managed to see a few others up in Scotland as well, who were all there to film the first P8 arriving into Kinloss, and that was a fantastic day. Despite the long journey up north, we managed to get to Kinloss within an hour of the P8 touching down for the first time. That was a really cool trip, and we all came back, yes, quite tired and fatigued, especially after, well, for me, 12 hours driving. It was quite a bit, but nonetheless it was a really exciting a really exciting start to the year. So that was at the start of February. Again, we had a few more storms and a few more interesting bits at Newcastle, but apart from that, not much else. And then the end of February really was a nice highlight, the chance to do a bit of filming at Manchester Airport. So this was sort of toward the end of the month, and managed to also do that filming along with fellow YouTubers Alex Praglovsky and Mr. Aviation Guy. Please check out their channels, I'm sure a lot of you already know them. Alex in particular from Canada does a lot of trip reports and does some fantastic footage from Canada, and Mr. Aviation Guy, he does some fantastic content from around Bristol way, and please do check out their channels. Really great content. So a couple of days filming at Manchester Airport, absolutely fantastic, and in hindsight it makes you appreciate the kind of movements that we got at the start of the year before everything changed due to the pandemic. Jumping into March 2020 was a really unusual month. For me, I had several trips plans to go to Serbia, Montenegro, Finland, and various other places filming throughout this year. However, you could tell at the start of the month that things were changing, and due to the pandemic, countries were closing and things inevitably in the normal sort of travel wouldn't be possible. On the 9th of March 2020, I went up to Edinburgh Airport to film some of the rugby rivals as Scotland and France were playing against each other, and there was a variety of movements. Not a great selection compared to, say, previous years, but again, looking back, it was still just nice to see that bit of traffic. Also, it's good not to forget that Flybe had just gone bust prior to this, so we lost a big player in the UK, especially in terms of regional connectivity. That had gone, and so this started off March with a few question marks as to how those voids in the market would be filled. After filming the various movements for the rugby match of France versus Scotland, I set off for what was one of the highlight trips of this year, to fly on an Avro RJ100 from Gothenburg to Stockholm. Flying initially with Ryanair from Edinburgh to Gothenburg, staying overnight, then setting off the next day to fly from Gothenburg to Stockholm-Bromma with Braathens Regional BRA on their RJ100. Now, things were changing quite quickly at this time. Initially, the last flight of the RJ100 was meant to be well into the end of March and possibly end of April time. Due to the pandemic though, that was brought forward, and as it turned out, the day that we flew on Sierra Echo Delta Sierra Romeo, an RJ100, that was its last day carrying passengers. It flew from Gothenburg to Bromma, Bromma to Malmo, and it has never operated a passenger flight since. So you can see how quickly things are changing, and to be in that time period, especially travelling in and around Europe, was quite a weird feeling. After filming at Stockholm-Bromma Airport and then flying to Brussels with Brussels Airlines, the idea was to then connect back to Edinburgh. It was crazy. We'd set off from Edinburgh to Gothenburg and the flight was fairly full, same as the one from Gothenburg to Bromma. However, from Bromma to Brussels, there was virtually about 25 to 30 passengers on board. And at this point you start to realise something's happening, something is changing. I think even then none of us could have foreseen just quite how things were going to change. Departing Stockholm-Bromma for me personally was a really weird experience, because you knew something big was afoot but you didn't know quite what. Myself and Daniel Sander got the chance to fly on that RJ100 and it was a fantastic experience. Please check out his trip report and his content on his channel. After flying to Brussels, then managed to do a bit of plane spotting around Brussels Airport, which again was fantastic to get that chance, before then flying back home to Edinburgh. This would be my last trip flying in and around Europe for the entire of 2020. And so on the 11th of March we returned back to Edinburgh. At this point, as I say, things were changing rapidly. Within less than a week it was announced that there would be a UK-wide lockdown, and we still didn't quite know how this was going to play out or what would be involved. I was supposed to be going to Glasgow Airport on the 28th of March to film the last air transit A310, the last air transit A310 as it turned out to the UK, and unfortunately due to the lockdown I was not able to go due to that. I was also supposed to be going to Dublin on the 30th and 31st of March, and again this was another trip that was cancelled. Then what followed over the next couple of months was very hard. It was I think for everyone, it was a culture shock. Suddenly you weren't able to plan anything, you weren't able to go about your normal business, and life changed drastically for everyone. I was also supposed to go up to Aberdeen for 2 weeks in May, as well as an enjoyable family holiday. It also gives us the chance to film aviation content for all of you from Aberdeen Airport, from Inverness, from Lossiemouth and various other places. Unfortunately, that was all cancelled. Local restrictions and the inability even to go on holiday locally meant that that was no longer possible. Throughout this time there were certain PPE and repatriation flights that were operated, notably the Air China 747 to Edinburgh Airport. This was a really interesting one to see, and it's very unlikely that we're ever going to see an Air China 747 in the UK again. That said, Emirates ended its flights to Newcastle, Edinburgh, and as of even this year, for 2021, Emirates is not looking to come back anytime soon. So again, this has all had an impact. By the end of the summer though, some restrictions were gradually being lifted. People were able to get out and about a little bit more, to travel more freely and to go places, but still things were not normal. They were not normal at all. So it's June 2020 now. The RAF have conducted a series of training flights to Newcastle International Airport, utilising their Airbus A400 Atlas and the P8 Poseidon, which was newly delivered at the start of the year. These were great movements to see, and I speak personally when I say, even though it might have only just been a single movement in a day, it was just nice to see some activity at the airport. Next, jumping into July, and as I say, restrictions were still gradually being eased, so it was possible to do more and more things. A day filming at Edinburgh Airport for myself, Northernaviation and Daniel Sander, I think was a welcome bit of respite after what had been quite a difficult few months. It had been difficult throughout the end of March, April, May and June, just to simply accept that you can't plan anything anymore. You can't even book to go away. The chances of cancellation or the flight being changed were so great that planning any filming activities outside of the UK was utterly pointless. Sadly, this year, Riot, the Royal International Air Tattoo at RAF Fairford, is known as one of the best air shows in the UK. Again, that was cancelled this year. Hopefully in 2021 it may return, but at the moment, the way things are, it's quite uncertain. That too was cancelled, along with various other events which were planned for the summer. We go into August of 2020, and again for me it was fairly quiet. Apart from having to work and so on, there weren't that many chances to get to the airport to get to film content. One of the interesting highlights was Storm Ellen at the end of the month. Now, usually during the summer months we don't typically get that many storms, so to get a storm at the end of the summer was quite interesting. In previous years I imagine the impact would have been slightly greater. However, due to the fact that we currently don't have that many airlines, EasyJet no longer has a base at Newcastle Airport, Thomas Cook sadly went under in 2019, Eastern Airways no longer has a base at the airport, and Ryanair have cut routes, as have various other airlines, so there's a lot less to see, and as a result, even when we have a storm like that, the impact just isn't as great as perhaps it would have once been. And at the end of the month, with fellow YouTuber Bristol Cardiff Airport at Edinburgh Airport, where it was just nice to film some of the movements throughout the day. Then a real highlight for me was on the 28th of August, was to fly on the Eastern Airways Saab 2000 from Teesside International Airport down to Newquay. This was one of my most last minute flights I have ever booked. I only booked it the day before I flew, and it was purely a fly on the Saab 2000. I managed to go down to Newquay, turn around and come back on the same aircraft on the same flight to Teesside. It was a really nice experience, and that was my first flight since previously when I flew in March, coming back from Sweden via Brussels. So it was a nice sort of chance just to get back in the air again and to see how things had changed. Obviously, one of the noticeable changes compared to when I last flew is you now need a mask. You also need to make sure that you always have your hands sanitized and so on and so forth. So a lot of different things had changed, but overall it was just nice to get back in the air again. So that ends August off. We then go into September, and again it still feels like the airlines are gradually returning, flights are picking up and things are going in the right direction. Eurowings returned with their Dusseldorf flight to Newcastle Airport using the Airbus A320, and this was a really welcome return. Laudamotion A320s were also used on flights from Palma de Mallorca to Newcastle Airport on behalf of Ryanair. However, it's good to note that throughout the summer, some destinations you were able to fly to and from without having to quarantine. However, a lot of popular places such as Spain, you still had to quarantine for up to 2 weeks or 10 days in order to fly to those places and return safely. This made it very unattractive to a lot of people. The idea that you would have to isolate when you came back to the UK, simply going away for a week and then having to isolate for 2 weeks on return made it a very long 3 weeks, and as a result fewer people travelled. However, I think the desire to still get away has always been there. We saw that when the restrictions on the Canaries were lifted toward the end of October, there was a surge in bookings. However, that quickly disappeared when the decision was taken to put the Canaries back onto the list of restricted destinations, ones where you would have to quarantine on arrival back to the UK. So this made things very up and down for the industry. There was no certainty. So personally, I just tried to focus on what I could do. I could largely still go to the airport and still film planes, but again you have a limited selection, so trying to find good movements to film was difficult. I took the chance at the beginning of October, whilst restrictions were still eased, to go down to London Heathrow Airport. I spent 3 days down there. At the same time, I went to RAF Waddington, RAF Coningsby, RAF Mildenhall and RAF Lakenheath, along with Brize Norton and Kemble to finish off with, stopping off at Birmingham Airport on the way back. It was a great 5 days away to enjoy filming aviation across the UK, at Heathrow especially, to see how things have changed there, especially as there are no more British Airways 747s, and at Birmingham Airport as well, where there was actually some nice movements to be seen. It was quite sobering though going to Kemble. Kemble really hit me hard. The last time I was at Heathrow, there were lines of Boeing 747s parked up at the various terminals at London Heathrow Airport. Having been at Heathrow Airport for that entire week and seeing the last 2 British Airways 747s depart, here I was at Kemble Airport in the Cotswolds, and all of the British Airways 747s are parked up, going to be scrapped ultimately, with a few of them having now been saved. That for me was a really weird feeling. I've never seen anything like it. Not just the fact the planes were parked there, that's one thing. The saddest part for me was how many people had come out, not necessarily plane enthusiasts, people who had travelled, who had flown on these 747s over years, who had family members who'd worked on them, who had friends or husbands or wives who'd been crew on them or piloted them. There was so many connections, and to see the amount of people there just to get a photo of these amazing jumbo jets parked up was absolutely incredible. It just shows you how awesome the British Airways 747 is and has been a part of British aviation history. So that ended at the very start of October. Sadly, not long after, another UK-wide lockdown again meant more restrictions and the inability to go further afield to film aircraft. Ultimately, it's your safety and people's safety around you that you need to take care of, and as a result, there was no other opportunity to film. So for me, October and November were very, very quiet months, and there wasn't an awful lot to be filmed, and there wasn't an awful lot of content to be shared, unfortunately. This is where having a good backlog of content comes in handy. At least you've got stuff to edit, and at least you've got stuff to keep you occupied and keep you busy. The beginning of December, and those restrictions were once again eased, and in a very short period of time we had two of arguably the most interesting movements at Newcastle International Airport. The first was two Kuwait Boeing C-17 Globemasters. Now, typically, Kuwait have always sent at least one C-17 into Newcastle Airport throughout a given year. However, this year they sent in two. And this is largely due to the fact that the De La Rue plant in Gateshead is meant to be closing. So it is likely that these are going to be the two last runs that these Kuwait Air Force C-17s do to Newcastle Airport, unfortunately. Then about 6 days later we had what for me is probably one of the best movements I have ever seen at Newcastle Airport. The Airbus A330XL Beluga. Back in February whilst at Manchester Airport, myself, Alex Praglovsky and Mr Aviation Guy had gone to Aberdeen Airport to try and film that very same aircraft. However, it was just in the early introductory phases with Airbus. So we did see a Beluga, but it wasn't the one that we wanted to see. To then see that same aircraft at my local airport to do some training flights, specifically with the Autoland system and with the strong crosswinds that we had, I never in a million years expected to see that this year, and it was truly one of the best highlights, best movements I've ever seen at Newcastle Airport. I know many people who managed to see it that day said exactly the same thing. And that brings us to the end of 2020. It's been a really challenging year. From the YouTube perspective, we started the year with 9,500 subscribers. We hit 10,000 subscribers on the 2nd of February 2020, and at the end of the year we finished with 11,800. That's over 2,300 extra people subscribed to the channel throughout the year. So I can't thank you all enough. Thank you all so much for your support, for watching the videos, for your comments, your encouragement. It really means an awful lot, so thank you all so much. And also to all of our dear channel members. Our channel members support us week in, week out, and all of your support doesn't go unnoticed. You truly are a major part of this channel. So what is left to say? All I have personally to say is a big thank you to everyone who's been part of making 2020 the best it could possibly be. The chances to film this year have been special. I think hindsight's a wonderful thing, to look back, to see what you did film, what you did see, and to appreciate those moments. I think that's probably the thing that stands out to me. Special thank you to Andycowanphotos as well. We've managed to film and see some incredible movements throughout this year, and also a big thank you to those at Esher Airfield who have always been so accommodating. Do check them out on Facebook. They're a great bunch of people, and Esher really is a fantastic airfield for general aviation and many other movements too. Also, a great big thanks to Mr Aviation Guy, Bristol Cardiff Airport, Daniel Sander, Alex Praglovsky, and every single one of you who has supported the channel throughout the year. A massive thanks to everyone at Niam PR, which is a group I co-run. All of your support throughout the year has been really appreciated. So thank you all very much. I hope you enjoyed this video, something a little bit different to what I usually do for the channel. I do these kind of videos and vlogs for our channel members, however this is just to a limited number. So if you'd like to become a channel member, do check it out at the join button on YouTube. Otherwise, please hit the subscribe button, leave a like on the video. Thank you all so much for watching, and again, let's try and make 2021 a better year for everyone. Take care of yourselves everyone, and we'll see you through the year.